All right, so in our master session here, we've got one scene so far in the library. Now again, in Ableton, you have two views. You have session view, which is vertical, or you have arrangement view, which is horizontal. This is what we were just looking at in the previous template. And this is ultimately what we'll run the files from in terms of service. It gives us a lot more control. It's a little bit easier to understand. You can see all the waveforms. In here, you basically can see boxes, and you have to double click on any file that you want to use or to edit. And you can't stop and start in the middle of a song. Once you stop this and it started again, it's going to start from the beginning, and it makes it really impractical for things like rehearsals. So what this will do is we will load all of our processed songs in here. And so we come into, again, we've had our original, we had our processing file or our session, I guess, and then we have the master folder. And from here, I've loaded, again, this is where it comes in really handy. I've got my click, guide, and bass, so I can just see those right at the top. I can just drop click and guide, bass is a little bit farther down, and then I can just know that everything else without a number goes in the master bus. Boom. And you can hold control to make it go vertical, or you can stack them in one channel, which we don't want to do by just dragging. But if you hold control, it will drag and create a horizontal view of all of these files. Now, because I already did that, I don't need this specific one, so I'm going to delete that scene. But then again, I drop the bass down here. I can drop the drums. If I programmed a MIDI channel or MIDI track with keyboard synthesizers, I can drop that in here. If I programmed any MIDI cues, I can drop that in these specific, like you can just go ahead and populate your session view in the master session, and eventually this thing builds out to where you've got a really well-refined, gorgeous library that when you open this session, your church can play any song and know that the files are right, they're clean, and you can have different arrangements, different keys in here. You can have lyric videos, all sorts of crazy stuff. So there is the loading process to get to the master session. From here, the week-to-week editing is something I will go over in the next session. But before I sign off for now, I want to make sure I point out a couple of things. Just Ableton basics. If I were to take you to come up here and click on this key mode, what that is key mapping. In fact, I'm going to open up this little window down here, and you can open up there in your view too, and anything you hover over it, if there's a description about it, it will tell you what it does. It's a really handy little feature. So I can either click on key mode, or I can hit Control K to get me there as well. And then I've got MIDI mode, and I can also hit Control M to activate that. That gives me a way to use my keyboard or a MIDI controller to navigate all of the little pieces of Ableton. It's a really, really handy tool. Let me open up and show you the keyboard commands for this master session. So if I open up and I click, I've got key mapping enabled, and I come here to my side menu, it will show you exactly what key assignments I have set up right now. And you can get to know this, and I'm happy to walk you through it. But basically, you can customize your session to whatever makes sense to you. Let me explain my brain to you a little bit. So I've set the number 1 on my keyboard to be for measure 1 and the start of song 1, whatever song 1 is. I can come back to the first bar of my session using 1. I will eventually set another marker, and it will become song 2, and I will key map it and assign it to song 2. So if I click this and I delete, it'll delete that assignment, or I can reselect it and hit 1 again, and it'll add that assignment. And therefore, my set becomes sequential. Song 1 is button 1, or number 1. Then we 2, 3, 4, and I just move myself through the service using my numbers. Up here, I've got a metronome that turns on with the M command. And then here I've got a scroll button or follow button, and I can do that by holding shift and hitting the period button, which actually turns out to be I think a greater sign or lesser than, I don't know which technically that would be, but it looks like an arrow that points sideways, and it points in the direction that the cursor follows. So that's the thinking there. I hold shift and it gives me an easy way to toggle follow on and off if for some reason that the assignment fails. And then I don't know what this symbol is called, but you can find it on your keyboard. That will deactivate automation. And then the same button, not using the shift, will enable something called back to arrangement mode. I'll get into that another time. But anytime, I'll say it the short way, anytime you play something in session view, instantly, I'm going to pause it and I'm going to come back to my arrangement view. Instantly notice two things. This button is now red and this button is now red. What that does is session view automatically overrides any automation that you may have had in here. So if I automated a track to turn up here and turn down here, that will be grayed out. And it will override any audio files that you have actually placed in here, because session view will always trump arrangement view, if that makes sense. And so if I play anything in here, I have to remember to deactivate that, and more than likely this as well. And so that's why they are the same button, just with the shift over one of them. In fact, let me give you one more quick demonstration. I'm going to select all, I'm going to copy, I'm going to come back here and hit set and hit song 1, top track, and paste. And I've got a bunch of bright, shiny files ready to roll. Now I'm going to play the same files over here. And as soon as I trigger anything in session view, I'm going to come back and everything's grayed out. See that? So now I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to hit my little asterisk button, or whatever that's called. It's next to the 1 right above the tab. And holding the shift takes all the automation adjustments. It gives me an automation back. And if I hit it again without the shift, it will take all the audio back to arrangement view. And so the thinking here is that we have a master library in session view. We click the scenes we want, select all, we copy them into arrangement view. We assign the markers, song 1, song 2, song 3, and then we tie the transitions together with minimal editing, and you've got a perfectly organized week-to-week formula for having an Ableton set that transitions seamlessly. It stops and triggers on its own. It does all sorts of fancy footwork for you. It can send lighting cues and lyric cues and video cues and all sorts of amazing stuff. And all of that can be pre-programmed in your library so that all you're doing week to week is copying and pasting. There is the general concept. I'll dive into more detailed stuff later. And so for now, see you later.